Hello, friends. We are interested in the geography of our views, so please like and write in the comments from which city are you watching us, and were there loud stories of betrayal in your city. Perhaps the next story about betrayal will be from your city, and we start. Jessica woke up early in the morning in her neat, immaculately furnished home in one of the quiet suburbs of Massachusetts. The first rays of the sun made their way through the light cream curtains, gently illuminating the bedroom, made in pastel colors. Outside the window, another seemingly perfect day was beginning. A green meadow in front of the house, an evenly trimmed garden. All this seemed to be the embodiment of the correct American dream, which many around her sincerely considered absolute happiness. And to some extent, they were right. Jessica and her husband Josh did have a calm, settled life, which from a distance seemed even enviable. They had been married for 12 years. Josh worked for a local insurance company and made good money, allowing his family to live in abundance and not need for anything. Their 12-year-old daughter, Haley, studied at a good school nearby and pleased her parents with her academic success. On the weekends, she studied modern dance and piano, demonstrating more and more talents, which her mother and father supported with joy and pride. However, behind this external idol, Jessica had long felt that something important was missing in her life. Stability, so valued in the family, gradually began to turn into boredom. Once upon a time, in the first years after the wedding, she was overwhelmed with feelings. Every morning she woke up with the feeling that the most wonderful man in the world was nearby. But as the years passed, the romance disappeared. Josh was still kind and caring, never forgot about family values, but increasingly spent time working to provide his wife and daughter with an even more comfortable life. Each of his days was subject to a clear routine: breakfast, a short trip to the office, working with documents or clients, returning home for dinner, rare family outings on the weekend. He was not prone to spontaneous actions, bright surprises, or any antics. Everything remained within the same plan, month after month. Jessica was grateful to her husband for his constancy and the feeling of a reliable rear, but she missed passion more and more. Once upon a time, she herself dreamed of traveling, learning new things, and immersing herself in exciting adventures. In her youth, she thought that she would marry someone who would share her thirst for experience. She also had happy moments with Josh, but life's routine quietly made their everyday life unbearably monotonous. At breakfast, they had short, routine conversations about plans for the day. In the evening, they talked about their daughter and her academic performance, discussed the electricity bill or purchases at the supermarket. Recently, Jessica increasingly felt a nagging feeling of emptiness. Every month, this feeling grew, and one day she did something she didn't expect from herself. She started a small, forbidden correspondence with a person whom she had only seen a couple of times at events at Haley's school. At first, everything looked innocent. A couple of messages in the evening like, "How are you? How was your day?" She convinced herself that this was friendly chatter, a little emotional release. But from each message, a wave of slight excitement rose inside her, which she had not experienced for a very long time in her usual family environment. In the end, she didn't even notice how more and more other numbers began to appear in her phone book. She wasn't looking for a specific romance or serious connection. Rather, she needed the feeling of flirtation, of keen interest from someone new, in order to feel desired and attractive. Despite the internal torment, Jessica justified herself. "After all, everything is in order at home. I am a wonderful mother, I adore my daughter, I cook a delicious dinner for my husband, and our family still looks happy. It's so innocent. I'm just looking for a little passion to keep me going." She continued to meet for coffee with an acquaintance from a local fitness club and to have lunch with one of her former university colleagues whom she accidentally found on a social network. No public shame, everything is done secretly in an environment where no one will notice anything. Josh probably could have understood that his wife was often late in the city, that notifications popped up on her phone every now and then, but he was in some kind of routine bubble, thinking about work, counting financial reports, trying to pay attention to his daughter, who was increasingly asking for walks or joint activities. Every evening, Jessica, looking like the most exemplary wife, continued to fulfill all her duties. On Wednesdays, she always took Haley to the dance studio. On Fridays, she took her to piano lessons, and on Saturdays, she went shopping with her husband. On Sunday, they went to church, met with neighbors, and no one would ever suspect anything wrong. Jessica learned to masterfully hide her correspondences, set passwords, and erase messages before going to bed. She almost felt like a spy in her own home. She was turning everything over in her head and taking careful steps. Sometimes she would stop for a minute, look at Josh, and ask herself why she couldn't just talk to him about what she missed. But she immediately remembered that talking about such things would only frighten him, and she did not want to look ungrateful. Still, he is a wonderful person, a reliable, caring father, and yet none of these arguments quelled the longing for something new. One episode in particular shook her up recently. She was sitting in a cafe in the city center with a man whose face was more or less familiar, but they had not communicated closely before. He gave her a couple of compliments, started a casual conversation, and she felt something like a spark flare up in her chest. I understood that this could go too far, and partly I already wanted it. When they parted that day, he asked her to meet again. Jessica hesitated. On the one hand, she was held back by the remnant of her conscience. She still loved her family. On the other hand, the forbidden adrenaline attracted me. In the end, she decided to give this man her phone number. Gradually, the casual connections became less random, and Jessica herself no longer noticed how she had ceased to be vigilant. That adrenaline turned her head. Dreams of passionate adventures, of a motel on the outskirts of the city where no one would see them, beckoned more and more. The problem was that the more this atmosphere captured her, the more careless she was with her phone. I didn't always delete messages right away. Sometimes I forgot to exit applications when I went to the kitchen to pour myself some tea. The belief that Josh wouldn't notice anything turned into deceptive arrogance. However, Josh still managed to sense something was wrong. He noticed that his wife had become too nervous, constantly dragging her phone from room to room, flinching at the sound of a new message, closing tabs if he suddenly appeared behind her back. He noticed that at night she sometimes sits on her phone under the excuse of, "I can't sleep," while before she preferred to just read a book before bed. At first, he did not attach much importance to these facts, chalking it all up to another surge of emotions, fatigue, or perhaps some kind of personal crisis. But in the depths of my soul, a disturbing seed was born. After all, he remembered how Jessica was always open. No special encryption, hiding the phone, intense gaze when he accidentally approached her from behind. And now everything is different. Meanwhile, Haley, their 10-year-old daughter, was just getting ready for a school concert. Her first serious performance on stage awaited her, not just a dance number, but a solo piano excerpt. The girl excitedly told me that she would play some famous melody. She really wanted her parents to be proud of her. Josh and Jessica helped her prepare. They specially placed a lightweight electronic keyboard in the living room of the house so that the child could rehearse even when not at school. In the evenings, stumbling over chords, Haley still smiled and laughed, and her parents encouraged her. It was these moments that still kept the thought in Jessica's mind. I still have a wonderful family. Maybe we should really stop. But then she remembered how her heart sank in anticipation of a new message or compliment from a person who looked at her, not as a mother and wife, but as a desirable woman. And again she was tormented by internal conflict. Several weeks passed like this. Surprisingly, nothing has changed externally. Jessica remained a charming housewife, whom all the neighbors considered almost the standard of a respectable American mother. Open, smiling, active, always ready to help with charity projects at school. Josh never stopped being a caring husband who paid all the bills and called his wife if he was late at work. At first glance, it seemed that their home was the embodiment of family happiness. Even Jessica's best friend, Megan, said, "Darling, you have everything you could ever dream of. A reliable man, a wonderful daughter, a cozy home, stability. Is this not enough?" And Jessica just shrugged, smiling and trying to change the subject. Because she couldn't tell her friend, "I want passion, I'm bored, I'm starting a relationship on the side." She didn't dare admit it so openly, even to herself, much less to anyone else. The hidden life gradually became more and more risky. One of Jessica's casual acquaintances, with whom she corresponded, began to hint more and more clearly about a date. Yes, she was afraid of failure, but she was attracted by the feeling that her desires and craving for something new could soon spill out into reality. One evening, when Josh was on a business trip, she finally gave this man consent. They spent several hours together in a bar in a nearby town. It was a little dark there was live music playing, and it seemed to her that no one would be able to recognize them. After drinking a glass of wine, she felt like a young adventurer who had escaped from the close circle of household chores. It was hard to believe that just a few hours ago, she was preparing lunch for her daughter and talking with Haley's teacher about the upcoming concert. This double life became an emotional swing that Jessica became deeply involved in, and it was during this period that she made that fatal mistake that changed everything. It happened on a weekday evening. Haley was already asleep in her room, tired after a long rehearsal. Jessica got into bed before Josh and, dropping her phone on the blanket, dozed off herself. She didn't notice that she forgot to set a password after her last login to one of the instant messengers. The phone vibrated quietly as a new message arrived, which the sender may have carelessly responded to after several hours of interruption. Josh was in the bathroom at that time, brushing his teeth, getting ready to go to bed. Hearing the sound of vibration, he automatically went out and saw his wife's phone on the bed, the screen of which was still illuminated with a new message. At first, he was not going to read anything after all. There was trust between the spouses. But then something caught his eye that he couldn't help but attach importance to. The name Cavan's Gym was glowing on the screen, and a short line of message. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since I saw your smile yesterday. When will I see you again?" Josh froze. His heart sank painfully. He sat silently for several seconds, looking at the phone. He wanted to believe that this was a simple joke, but his intuition immediately told him that this did not look like a joke. Jim? Since when did she have such close contact with someone from there? He remembered that his wife goes to a fitness club, yes, but to write to someone like that. Involuntarily, he swiped his finger across the screen, and the application opened. There was no password, nothing prevented him from seeing the latest messages. Normally, he would never allow himself to read his wife's personal correspondence, but now he felt a growing foreboding. After scrolling through a few lines, he saw that Cavan admires not only the smile, but also the figure of Jessica, how he looks forward to their next meeting, hints at a past walk together, and something more intimate. Each word beat in Josh's mind like a hammer, shattering his idea of their family and happy life. He wanted to scream, wanted to push his wife aside and demand an explanation. But at the last moment, he seemed to be paralyzed. He stood up and quietly left the bedroom, trying not to wake Jessica. Having locked himself in the living room, he sat for several minutes in the twilight, looking at the wall and swallowing the lump of resentment and horror growing in his chest. Is this all true? Maybe this is a one-time stupidity. Or has she been doing this for a long time? Why didn't I notice anything? How can I live now? How can I look her in the eye? What about Haley? She's not to blame for anything. Thoughts swirled, each more terrible than the other. After some time, he heard the bedroom door creak. Apparently, Jessica went to the kitchen to drink water. Afraid of running into her, Josh cowered on the sofa, even trying to hold his breath so that she wouldn't notice him. He felt completely empty. Pictures from a past life popped up in my head, those days when they were immensely happy, the birth of Haley, their first trip to New York together, a photo shoot in front of the Christmas tree in Rockefeller Center. Then Jessica held his hand and smiled as if he was her whole world. What went wrong? How did he miss the moment when everything started to fall apart? At dawn, he finally decided to return to the bedroom, and Jessica was still sleeping, as if nothing had happened. The phone was on her bedside table, and the screen was now locked with a password. Obviously, she managed to remember her carelessness and hid the evidence. Josh lay down next to her, trying not to wake his wife, but he couldn't sleep. He lay with his eyes open, thinking about what would happen next. Either talk to her right now, or pack up and leave, or pretend that nothing happened. It was unbearably difficult to make any decision. By dawn, when the room became lighter, he did not sleep a wink for a second. In the morning, Jessica, as if suspecting nothing, prepared breakfast: omelet with ham, fresh fruit, toast with cream cheese. She woke up Haley as usual. "Honey, it's time for school, come down." When she appeared in the kitchen, half asleep but in good spirits, she began to tell me that today they would be holding a concert rehearsal in the classroom. Josh, sitting at the table, looked at his wife and daughter as if he was in a dream, where everything suddenly took on a distorted sound. He tried to squeeze out a smile, but everything inside was shrinking. Jessica noticed that something was wrong with him and asked, "Darling, did you sleep well? You look very tired. Everything is fine." "Yes," he muttered, trying to smile. "My head hurts a little. Probably didn't get enough sleep." "Maybe you shouldn't go to the office today. Take a day off, stay at home, rest," Jessica advised, while watching the expression on her husband's face with slight concern. "No, everything is fine," he answered with a forced smile. "I'll just come out later. We have important documents there." He didn't look her in the eye. It seemed to him that if he looked up now, she would immediately understand that he knew everything. But she seemed unaware of this. After finishing breakfast, Jessica drove Haley to school, while Josh sat in the kitchen, mindlessly staring at the countertop. He wanted to scream, but instead he just clenched his hands powerlessly into fists. Left alone, he went up to the bedroom and opened the closet. He looked at his clothes, suits that he wore to work, more casual things for walking. Everything seemed somehow alien. He suddenly remembered how a year ago he and his wife were choosing a new business suit for him, and Jessica helped, advising which jacket suited him best. Then she was cheerful, joked, and kissed him on the cheek in the fitting room. Was it all fake? Maybe she was just playing the role of a loving wife all this time. He could not believe that their life, which seemed so reliable, could crumble overnight like a house of cards. He spent the entire day trying to collect his thoughts. "I went to the office, signed a couple of documents, but couldn't really work." His thoughts kept returning to what he read on the phone screen. He went over in his head options for conversations with Jessica, rehearsed phrases. "How could you? Why did you do this? We are family. Do I need to file for divorce now?" But instead of clarity, he felt only a growing emptiness. In the evening, Jessica returned with her daughter. Haley chatted happily about her homework. When she went to her room to do her homework, only the husband and wife remained in the living room. Jessica walked to the window and looked at her husband with obvious excitement. "Josh, honey, you really look strange. Did something happen?" He got up from the sofa, took a deep breath, but did not find the strength to start speaking frankly. He looked at his wife, at her worried eyes, and suddenly squeezed out, "It's okay, just a lot of work. And I'm still thinking about how to help Haley with the upcoming concert. It is important for her that we be there to support her." "Of course, we're close," she answered, trying to make her voice soft. But something in her tone said that she sensed something was wrong. Maybe she detected the unusual coldness with which he now addressed her. Or she herself already felt remorse for hiding from him when she looked into his eyes. The night passed in tense silence. Jessica felt that her husband was on the verge of talking about something serious, but did not dare. She thought, has he really learned something? Or is he having problems at work? She reassured herself, no, he couldn't guess. I erased everything. I'll be careful he won't find out anything. But Josh already knew, and this knowledge burned him from the inside. He listened to Jessica tossing around in bed, unable to fall asleep for a long time, and wondered how he had ended up in such a nightmare. He never imagined that he would experience betrayal in his marriage, and he certainly didn't believe that his seemingly ideal wife would turn out to be a cheater. The next day, the situation had not moved forward. Josh left for work earlier than usual, trying to avoid unnecessary conversations, and meanwhile Jessica took Haley back to school and went about her business. She realized that she was walking on edge. A conflict was unfolding inside her. One part of her soul cried out to stop these secret connections and try to save the family, while the second part wanted even more of this bright passion, which beckoned so much when someone sought her out, when someone looked at her with a burning gaze, and her heart beat twice as hard. Josh, returning in the evening, pointedly did not touch Jessica's phone and did not ask anything. But she noticed that he did not hug her or try to kiss her, as usual. In the evening, when the daughter was already asleep, they sat down to dinner. The conversation didn't go well again. An oppressive atmosphere hung in the air. Jessica picked up her fork, jabbed it into a piece of steak, then put it down. She finally decided to ask the question that until that moment she was afraid to say out loud. Josh, are you sure you're okay? I feel something is wrong. Don't shy away from answering, please. He looked at her, met her gaze, and her heart sank with the feeling that now he would say everything. But he only looked away again and repeated his usual excuse. I'm tired and burned out. It will pass. She understood that there was little truth in these words, but continued to remain silent. After all, if he knew, he would have already spoken out, right? She reassured herself with this. She didn't know that he had read the correspondence. She couldn't even imagine what exactly he saw with his own eyes. She just felt their ideal picture was falling apart. The life they tried to build was still on the visible surface, but inside there were no longer the same feelings and trust. The next few days dragged on like a sticky, painful pause. Everyone went their own way, pretending that everything was as usual, but tiny details revealed the truth. Their dialogues were reduced to banalities, there were almost no joint hugs left, and Josh increasingly slipped away headlong into work. Jessica tried to do household chores, play with Haley, and help her prepare for the concert. But even the daughter noticed her mother's distracted state. Mom, are you listening? Haley asked when she talked about what songs were planned to be included in the program of the school event. Yes, of course, honey, Jessica answered, perking up. I was just thinking. About what? Haley clarified childishly innocently. About how we'll dress up for your concert. Jessica lied and began enthusiastically thinking about what kind of ribbon she could weave into her daughter's hair. Meanwhile, her thoughts were racing. Should I try to return to my previous relationship with my husband? Should I tell him that I miss him, that we need to reboot our marriage, go somewhere together, leave our everyday life for a while? What if it's already too late? What if he knows everything? After all, he behaves so strangely. But if he knew for sure, he probably wouldn't be silent. Maybe he really just has work problems. She decided to be more careful, to temporarily stop meetings with which she was too carried away. But the phone still contained contacts of people with whom she had casual connections. Sometimes they wrote, and Jessica's heart pounded painfully with guilt and desire at the same time. From time to time, she would delete the message, reassure herself. It's not so scary. Perhaps this is just my way of regaining my lost zest for life. But for some reason, it no longer brought joy. Josh, in turn, suffered in silence. Every night he remembered those few lines from the correspondence between Kevin and Jessica. When will we see you again? This simple sentence burned in his brain like a neon sign. This meant that they had already seen each other, that there was something between them. How far has it gone? Was it a simple affair or something more? And most importantly, why did Jessica look for this on the side? He went over the years together in his memory, looked for his guilt. Perhaps he missed something, did not pay attention to her, gave her little romance. But all this seemed not a sufficient reason to cross the line of betrayal. He was in pain, but so far he could not decide to have an open conversation. He was afraid to lose his temper, afraid that if he spilled it now, their family would never be the same. Part of him subconsciously hoped that this was some kind of mistake or misunderstanding, but his mind resisted. The correspondence was too clear. Every day the tension grew. It seemed as if the house was filled with cold air. All the smiles fizzled out beyond the threshold, where they could be seen by other people's eyes. But silent misunderstanding reigned within the family. Jessica continued to hope that the vague fears would dissipate, that everything would return to normal. Josh hesitated, perhaps waiting for the moment to speak about the main thing. He wanted to understand himself, collect his thoughts, and not make an instant verdict, although the feeling of betrayal was eating him up from the inside. Sometimes he looked at Haley, who was excitedly talking about school, and understood. If he started a scandal right now, the girl could suffer the most. He didn't want to ruin her life. Jessica drove home that evening with a heavy heart. The cats were scratching at her soul, although she herself could not understand what exactly was pressing on her so much. Over the past few days, the tension between her and Josh had become almost palpable, like a thick fog shrouding their every word and gesture. He still hadn't started a direct conversation, and she tried to convince herself that it was for the best after all. Perhaps he didn't know the whole truth. Perhaps his sadness is related solely to work problems. Or maybe he is having a temporary crisis. This is how she consoled herself, although something inside told her that a storm was coming, comparable to the destructive elements. When she parked the car on the sidewalk, she saw from afar that not only the main light was on in the living room, but also the sconces on the walls. This meant that all family members were gathered in the house, although this usually only happened on holidays or special occasions. She didn't really remember if there was any family dinner scheduled today, but she noticed her sister Emily's car and another one her father's in the driveway. They probably forgot to tell me, she thought. Or did you decide to make a surprise? However, my heart felt uneasy. My sister usually warned me in advance before coming. My parents weren't fans of surprise visits either, and yet everything is here, which means it is something special. Jessica tried not to panic. She straightened her hair, quickly glanced in the rearview mirror, and, feeling a slight trembling, headed towards the front door. Opening it, she immediately heard the voices suddenly fade away. There was a heavy silence in the air, as if everyone was waiting for her to appear. In the living room, Jessica's parents, her sister Emily and her husband, two close family friends Mike and Terry, as well as Haley herself gathered around a large oval table. Josh stood next to his daughter. Looking at their faces, Jessica realized that this was not a warm, friendly evening. There was a chill here, so thick it took your breath away. "Hi," Jessica said quietly, trying to make her voice sound natural. "What's going on here? I didn't know you were all going." Nobody answered immediately. Everyone looked at each other, and the tension became even stronger. Emily, who was usually the most straightforward in the family, cleared her throat first, but she too seemed confused. "Sit down," she said briefly, not even trying to smile. Jessica noticed her mother sitting with her eyes wet from tears, and her father looking down at the floor with a stony expression on his face. It was as if he refused to look at her. Are they sick? Did something happen? Flashed through Jessica's head. Why does everyone look so dead? Jessica slowly lowered her purse to the floor, approached the table, and saw that the food on the plates remained untouched, as if no one had started dinner. In the center of the table stood an already cooked roast turkey. Next to it was a salad, and, as an involuntary witness, a brewed coffee pot. People seemed to be gathered here, but they had no desire to eat or carry on a conversation. On the contrary, everyone looked at her with heavy, condemning glances. Haley stood a little further away, her eyes red from tears, squeezing her father's hand in her hand. Josh looked tired, but determined, as if he had already prepared for the final battle, where he would dot all the I's. "Come in," he repeated in a quiet but firm voice. "We need to talk." She walked to the table and sat down on the nearest chair. The room was hot, but Jessica felt as if a wave of ice had hit her skin. She didn't know with whom or how to start a conversation. My father sat on the right and showed with all his appearance that he was depressed. Jessica's mother, usually a calm and gentle woman, was now quietly wiping her tears with a handkerchief. Emily crossed her arms over her chest and looked at her sister with some mixture of pain and indignation. Josh walked around the table and stood opposite his wife, looking her straight in the eyes. "I told everyone the truth," he said, as if he had fired a bullet. I wanted there to be no more lies in this house. Everyone needs to know what's going on." Jessica's world began to crumble rapidly and irrevocably. Her heart was pounding so hard that blood was pounding in her ears. "He knows everything," was all that flashed through my head, but she still hoped to grasp at the straw of doubt, timidly muttering, "What? What is the truth exactly? Although deep down she understood that the illusions had come to an end. Josh clasped his hands, as if afraid they were shaking, and looked around at everyone present. I read your correspondence. I know that you have another man. And as it turned out, not alone. I found more messages. He paused, swallowing hard, like a man who is forced to utter words that pierce his heart. I didn't want to talk about it in front of everyone, but since our family is here, they should know why we might have to separate. I can't bear to continue to lie and pretend that we are still the perfect couple. There was a painful pause. Jessica's mother sobbed again, and her father, hearing these words, closed his eyes, as if wanting to close himself off from reality. Emily bit her lip, barely containing the irritation mixed with pain. Jessica felt the blood drain from her cheeks, as if she had been doused with boiling water and at the same time pierced by cold. She looked at Josh. Did you tell everything? She whispered, feeling that she could not raise her head. Yes, he confirmed. I couldn't carry it inside me any longer and pretend that nothing happened. I needed to speak up, and besides, you yourself know that we have a daughter. She is no longer a little girl. It is important for her to understand why everything in her family can go downhill. Why did her mother decided that she needed to have someone else? How could you drag Haley into this? Jessica twitched painfully, instantly feeling a stab of fear. She's only 12, she shouldn't. But Haley herself interrupted her, suddenly throwing up her head and angrily blurting out. I wasn't supposed to know that, right? What? I was supposed to think that everything was fine with us. What is an ideal mom? And you? The girl's voice broke into a broken sob. You lied to all of us. How could you? Jessica reached out to her daughter in confusion, but she recoiled. Don't touch me. You ruined our family. Haley screamed and burst into tears again. Jessica's heart was torn with guilt and horror at what was happening. The sight of his own daughter screaming, "Don't touch me," was like a blow. She realized that her complicated motives, boredom, desire for passion, the desire to feel alive, led to what she feared most. Haley's tears, her family's disappointment, humiliation in front of her family and friends. Dad said we might get a divorce, Haley blurted out, turning to Josh. He said that you can't live together with Mom. If Mom did this to us, I hate you. The last exclamation was addressed to Jessica, and these words hit her painfully. Haley, no. Please don't say that. Jessica tried to stop her daughter, jumping up from her chair. However, the girl slipped out and grabbed Josh's hand. I don't want to hear anything. You lied. You will never again be the mother I was proud of. Haley's face was distorted with anger and pain. She tried to wipe away the tears with her fists, but they continued to flow down her cheeks. Sitting nearby, Jessica's mother, Mrs. Griffin, could not stand the sight of her granddaughter and also burst into tears. Jessica's father stood up, clenched his fists, but did not say a word. He was clearly in a state of shock. His face turned purple, and he turned to the wall, as if he could not find the strength to look at his daughter. No one expected this from him. He had supported his family all his life, taught his children to be honest and responsible, and now he could not bear the realization that his beloved daughter had cheated on her husband and jeopardized the well-being of her own children. Dad, Jessica croaked, trying to get closer. Please, look at me. I don't want to, he finally answered, his voice hoarse with emotion. I never would have thought. The words got stuck in his throat. At this moment, Emily, Jessica's sister, could not stand it and stood up from the table, loudly pushing back her chair. Her gaze was full of bitterness. How could you do this? She asked, approaching Jessica. I always protected you when we were children. Then when you got married, I thought you had the best family life of all of us. You yourself constantly said how much you valued Josh, admired him. And suddenly we find out. Not even one man, right? These words made Jessica shrink. She understood that her sister was probably already aware of all the details that Josh had told her. Her actions, which she herself justified or called just a little flirting, now appeared before her loved ones in the worst possible light. No one saw any undertones or nuances behind this, and Jessica herself now realized that she could not find an excuse. Emily, she began, but stopped short, unable to find the words. What can I say? Should I say that I was bored or wanted passion? Does this sound convincing when your child is crying in front of you and your own father is shrinking in pain before your eyes? Better shut up, Emily said coldly, her eyes full of disappointment. Family friends Mike and Terry sat silently. They seemed confused, clearly not knowing how to react. Mike, who had once seen Jessica many times in the guise of a caring wife and mother, nervously rubbed his forehead, at a loss for what to say. Terry, his wife, bit her lip, almost staring at Haley, who was the most traumatized by this whole situation. Finally, she tried to add at least a drop of sympathy. Maybe we won't judge right now. Let's calm down, and Haley and all of us. No, Josh snapped decisively, turning to Terry. I understand your good intentions, but I need clarity. I needed to see what was going on and show everyone how things were. He spoke harshly, but there was a broken note in his voice. She hid it for too long. And I carried the pain within me all these last weeks, not knowing what to do. And then I realized I can't pretend anymore. This applies not only to me and Jessica, but also to Haley and the entire family who believed in us and considered us an example. Jessica felt a lump rise in her throat. Inside, a desperate desire flared up to turn back time, not to cross the line that she had crossed. Now, watching as all the people dearest to her turned away in turn, she realized that no forbidden passion was worth these destructive consequences. But it was too late. Mom, Haley said, breathing heavily through her tears, you can't even imagine how painful it is to think that you enjoyed life with other men while I hoped that we had an ideal family. I talked about you many times at school, said how cool you are, how you helped me at rehearsals. And now I understand that you were just lying. You made me believe that we were happy, although you yourself were looking for adventure. For what? These words made Jessica shrink even more. She took a step towards her daughter, but she recoiled so desperately that Josh was forced to put his arm around Haley's shoulders, shielding her with himself. Jessica came across his gaze. It combined anguish and determination. At that moment, he seemed to her like an impregnable wall, blocking the path to her daughter. Josh, I'm sorry, she said, barely audible, falling back into her chair, unable to stand any longer. My legs were shaking and tears were sticking to my eyelashes. I don't know how to explain. It was a mistake. Everything got out of control. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I love you. Do you love it? Josh asked with a bitter smile. What a strange understanding of love you have. Do you even realize that we are now on the verge of divorce? And not just you and me. You are ruining our daughter's life. But maybe we can try to fix it. Jessica began, hoping that all was not lost. To correct, her father interrupted bitterly, who had been sitting silently all this time, clenching his fists. Fix what? The shame you brought on your family? Do you understand what this looks like? We were proud of you. Damn, you were an example for us. Now, he turned and looked at Jessica's mother, almost pleadingly. Tell her something. Mrs. Griffin looked up at her daughter, eyes swollen from tears, but only whispered, what can I say? We just don't understand how you could get this far. I'm so sorry for Haley and Josh. How could you cross all the boundaries? Mom, Jessica said plaintively, but her mother shook her head. No, not now, she answered quietly, again pressing the handkerchief to her lips. I can't talk to you. I need time. Squeezing her knees with trembling hands, Jessica turned her gaze to her sister, hoping that at least Emily would try to say something less, cutting off the path to dialogue. But the sister only said coldly, I don't know if you should hope that someone will be on your side. You made this choice yourself, Jess. These are your actions, and you must be responsible for them. There was a heavy sigh. It was Josh who seemed to have exhaled the last remnants of his restraint. Looking at his daughter, who was clinging to him, he said with pain, I tried to explain to Haley that adults sometimes make mistakes, that sometimes families get divorced. She understood everything in her own way, but now her heart is broken, just like mine. Because you, Jessica, crushed all our hopes, and I'm not going to turn a blind eye to this. Jessica covered her face with her hands, feeling painful spasms in her chest. She heard a barely audible sob coming from behind her and to the side. It was probably her mother or Terry, or perhaps even one of her friends who accidentally found out about the tragedy. But now there were no strangers here except Mike and Terry, and they were more likely people who knew the family too well. Jessica felt as if the walls of the room were closing in on her. The words divorce, shame, and how could you were like red-hot thorns cut into my consciousness. She looked at Haley timidly. The girl stood behind her father, looking at her mother as if she were a stranger, an unwanted guest in their home. Even a few days ago, Jessica could not have imagined that her own daughter would look at her with such contempt. Children's brand, "I hate you," throbbed, tearing my soul apart. I did all this without realizing how I would ruin your lives, Jessica admitted, stuttering, turning her gaze back to Josh. Forgive me, please. I know how stupid it sounds, but I didn't want to hurt anyone. But she did, he said quietly, lowering his head. And we all have to go through this. Personally, I don't know what to do next right now. When I found out, at first I just wanted to kick you out, file for divorce immediately. He exhaled angrily, as if trying not to break down. But then I thought about Haley, that she had a concert school, that it would be hard for her to bear all this. And I decided to pull myself together, wait, and figure it out. But I don't want to figure it out alone. We have a family, relatives. They must know the truth. They have the right to understand why I will decide this way if we get divorced. Through her tears, Jessica noticed that her parents weren't arguing with him. Father still stood with his back turned, only gripping the armrest of his chair until his knuckles turned white. The mother pressed a handkerchief to her lips and cried. The sister stood opposite, crossing her arms and breathing heavily. Perhaps she was trying to control herself so as not to say too much. In this oppressive silence, only Haley's muffled sobs could be heard. Then Josh spoke again, addressing both Jessica and everyone else. I won't make a big scandal now. I don't want Haley to listen to the screams and insults, but I made a promise to myself that I would not deceive her. She is no longer a child. I think she should know why Mommy didn't always come home on time, why there was so much tension at home, why Mommy and Daddy don't look at each other the same way anymore. She has the right to know that all this is because Jessica decided to find passion on the side. The words sounded bitter and hopeless. Haley sobbed, closed her eyes, and then suddenly shouted loudly. I hate listening to all this. I went to my place. With these words, she broke free from her father's arms and rushed to the stairs to the second floor. No one tried to stop her. Only Jessica took a timid step after her, but quickly realized that her daughter did not want to see her. There was a long silence, during which everyone was lost in their own thoughts. Jessica's mother tried to pull herself together, all the time repeating a quiet, "Lord, why?" The father shrank even more, as if tired of everything he had heard. Jessica understood that all this was the result of her own mistakes, but the reality seemed so terrible that she simply did not know where to turn. She wanted to run after her daughter and hug her, but she saw that this would only traumatize Haley more. I guess that's all for today, Jessica's father said, still not looking at his daughter. I'm sorry, Josh, that I'm not able to help you right now. I can't calm down. I can't even believe that this is actually happening. I don't blame you, Josh responded, running a hand through his hair and clearly trying not to lose his temper. It's just, everyone knows everything now. I don't want to hide anymore. That's right, Emily said briefly. Enough lies. Let each of us learn this lesson. Jessica realized that her sister had pulled away too. There was no longer any warm sisterly support in her eyes. There was only a cold statement of fact. You betrayed your family. No one threw harsh insults at her, but perhaps it was even more painful than if they had shouted and scolded her. The cold disappointment of the relatives seemed stronger than any angry scandal. They were discouraged, humiliated. They felt that their daughter had committed a betrayal, and at the moment they did not have the strength to continue the conversation. "Maybe it's better for you to stay with a friend or in a hotel," Terry said suddenly. Her voice sounded softer than the others, but there was still a strong determination in it. "Let Haley and Josh be alone for a while. She needs stability now. And you need time to think about what you want." "I can't just leave the house," Jessica shuddered, hugging herself with her arms. "Here is my husband, my daughter." "They can't be with you now either," Emily objected. "Look at your father's face, at the fact that your mother can barely breathe from tears, and understand that your phrase, 'forgive me,' is not enough to heal this wound. Everyone is in shock now." "But give me time," Terry repeated quietly. "It would be better if you packed the essentials and went to Megan or someone else who would agree to shelter you," Josh suddenly said in an almost indifferent voice. "I won't file for divorce this very evening if that's important to you. But I can't pretend that everything is fine. Besides, Haley doesn't want to see you right now." Jessica felt herself crumbling even more. How, in just a few moments, what she considered a reliable rear turned into a zone of exclusion. She dreamed of some bright emotions, but got a gap between herself and the people closest to her. "I understood," she barely said, choking with tears and shame. "I'll go upstairs and collect some things." She looked around the room guiltily, but no one answered. The mother continued to cry silently. The father stood as if he wanted to disappear from this house. Emily turned to the window, and Terry bowed her head, avoiding looking directly at Jessica. Josh was silent. Family friends didn't say anything either, because any attempt to get closer and console seemed ill-timed and painful for the others. Near the front door, there was still a sad table setting: untouched turkey, withering lettuce, cold coffee. This entire dinner was supposed to be a family dinner, but it turned into a podium for publicly voicing betrayal. Moving her legs with difficulty, Jessica slowly walked upstairs to the bedroom, where the familiar smell of freshly washed clothes and the faint aroma of the perfume she used in the morning still hung. She remembered how recently she had happily chosen this perfume, thinking that she would impress Josh. Now she stood at the wardrobe, mechanically looking for her travel bag. Everything inside screamed that she didn't want to leave, that this was her home, her family. But she realized, now she is not welcome here. Tears blurred her eyes as she put a couple of replacement t-shirts, jeans, and a cosmetic bag into her bag. I heard the quiet voices of my father and Emily somewhere in the corridor, but did not try to make out the words. I knew that they would not say anything supportive anyway. Throwing her bag over her shoulder, she walked to the door of Haley's room and knocked softly. Silence in response. Finally, she decided to open the door slightly, only to see the girl sitting on her bed with her back to her, headphones in her ears. Apparently, Haley turned on the music at full volume, trying to drown out her worries. "Haley," Jessica called out to her in a half-whisper, but her daughter didn't even turn around. "Forgive me," she whispered and closed the door, realizing that this short phrase would not change anything now. Going downstairs, she passed by relatives, whom she found in the same painful situation in the living room. Father stood by the window, Mother and Emily were next to him, and Josh, Mike, and Terry were closer to the exit. When Jessica appeared, everyone fell silent for a while. "I'm leaving to see Megan," Jessica said, coughing quietly. "I can't explain how ashamed I am. I hope you can find the strength to forgive me, at least someday." No one said any comforting words in response. The father only nodded briefly, looking at the floor. The mother bit her lip, wiping away her tears again. Emily turned away, pretending her eyes were fixed on the family photo on the wall. Josh said nothing, just nodded slightly, making it clear that he heard her, but did not agree to forgive or enter into any argument. Mike and Terry seemed so stunned that they were just waiting for it to be over. Jessica knew that this scene was the point of no return. On this cold evening, her life, which she considered almost ideal, ended. Yes, she lacked passion, adrenaline, but what came in its place was tragedy and destruction. She looked in despair at her loved ones, who had once been her support, and now could hardly hold back tears of pain and disappointment. And most of all, it tore her heart that Haley, her girl, screamed hatred. Jessica knew that the burden of her mistake would haunt her for a very long time. So, having finally heard neither good wishes nor reproaches, she took a step beyond the threshold. The door behind him closed with a muffled thud. Ahead lay an empty street with the lights on. There was a faint smell of approaching rain in the air. Once upon a time, this house seemed to her like a quiet haven, a protected little world where she was embraced by a loving family. Now she was leaving, knowing that her presence here would only cause pain and anger for everyone who was truly dear to her. And this realization destroyed her from the inside, filling her soul with a feeling of irreparable loss. Jessica opened her eyes with the feeling that everything inside had grown cold and shrunk. She lay on someone else's cot in Megan's living room and tried to remember how she got here. Late last night, after her family found out about her betrayal, she had nowhere to go and Megan generously offered her a place to stay. But even here, under her friend's roof, sleep seemed somehow unattainable. She tossed and turned, constantly seeing the tense faces of her loved ones in front of her. Early in the morning, Megan peered out from behind the door, looking at her friend with concern. "Did you get any sleep?" she asked quietly. "Almost no. Thank you for letting me in." "I have no idea what to do now," Jessica answered, getting up with difficulty. My body ached and my head was spinning. Neither sedatives nor tears helped. The mental pain remained unbearable. "No matter how scary it is, you have to come home and face reality," Megan said, running her hand through her friend's hair. "Try to at least talk to Josh. Maybe something else can be smoothed out." "I doubt it," Jessica sighed sadly. "Yesterday, he told everyone that I cheated on him. My daughter screamed that she hated me and my parents. Mom said, 'I didn't raise you for this.' Dad simply turned away and told me to get out." Megan squeezed her friend's shoulder. "I'm not judging you, but apparently everyone is too upset and angry right now. Either way, you can't stay here forever. Sorry, but I don't have the conditions for a long stay." "I understand," Jessica nodded. "Thank you for letting me in at least for the night." She took her bag and went outside, where the early sun was just beginning to dissipate the night haze. It seemed to her that her whole life had turned into severe torture. She had never felt so alone before. As I started the car, I remembered how just recently everything was going as usual. A stable marriage, daughters' smiles, calls from parents. And then it seemed to her that all this was too predictable. Now, in one evening, she has lost her most precious possession. The road to the house took less than half an hour, and all the time she peered into the mirrors, as if looking for an answer on how to behave. But all around was a quiet suburb, and ahead was the fear of returning to an empty home. When she parked at her house, she saw that there were boxes and someone else's car with an open trunk on the porch. My heart skipped a beat. "Is he really taking everything and leaving forever?" she thought. As I got closer, I noticed Josh coming out of the door of the house, holding a cardboard box in his hands. He looked tired but determined. When he saw Jessica, he paused, but there was no softness in his eyes. "Are you coming back?" he asked briefly, placing the box on the edge of the porch. "Yes, I have nowhere else to go," she admitted, feeling a shiver run down her spine. "I'm collecting the remains of my things," he said dully. "Haley said she doesn't want to stay with you another minute. She is with my parents. I myself don't want to live nearby anymore." Jessica felt a sharp pain in her chest. I imagined how the daughter was crowded in her parents' house, crying from hatred of her mother, and she knew that everything was her own fault. "Can I at least?" She began, but stopped short. What could she ask for? Talk to your daughter? Haley herself made it clear that she did not want to see her mother. "It's better not," Josh said, catching her gaze. "I'm not going to ban you from communicating forever, but now she's so angry that anything you say will only make the situation worse." "I understand," Jessica whispered, lowering her eyes. "And the parents, what are they?" "They consider you a traitor." "Sorry, but this is a fact," he replied, picking up another box. Actually, they support me because they saw Haley crying all night and vowing to never forgive you. It seems like your mom and dad don't want to see you either, because you disgraced everyone. Jessica's heart sank at the last words. I replayed in my head the conversation with my mother, who just yesterday repeated that her father was shouting, "I didn't raise her for this, let her figure it out herself." I couldn't even imagine that my own father would abandon her like that, but apparently the betrayal seemed unforgivable to him. "And friends," she said uncertainty. "Friends?" Josh asked with a bitter smile. "The majority took my side because they consider you to be to blame for the collapse of the family. Someone is silent, but is in no hurry to protect you. You yourself know very well that people talk. The city is small." Jessica fell silent. Two movers appeared behind me and removed the remains of the furniture from the house. She remembered the cute trinkets that she and her husband had once bought. Now this past is disappearing. She looked away, feeling that she could not watch the house empty. "I filed for divorce," Josh added. "Time will put everything in its place, but I think you understand. Our trust cannot be restored. Haley wants to live with me, and no one will judge her. Even your parents support this idea." His words hurt the ears. How many times did she herself say that it's just fun when she started secret relationships? Somehow, I didn't think that all this would come out and destroy the family. But now she had no right to argue. "You do as you see fit," she whispered, slightly raising her chin. "Just, please tell Haley that I love her. Whatever she says, I'm ready." She doesn't want to listen to these words. "Everything sounds fake to her," Josh snapped. "Sorry, but that's exactly what she repeated. Let mom understand what it's like to lose the most precious thing." This phrase finally finished off Jessica. A lump stuck in my throat. I wanted to freeze and not move. She watched as Josh carried the last of the packages and watched as the truck parked at the curb prepared to leave. Her life was taken from her home within a few hours. After a while, he slammed the trunk of the car inside. "I'll leave right now. It's better for you to stay here. If you try to seek a meeting with your daughter, warn me first. And in general, I don't recommend confronting my parents. They are extremely angry." "I understand," she nodded, clutching her bag to her chest. "Okay," Josh muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I hope you realize that your actions have consequences. I'm tired of repeating how wonderful everything was and how you ruined it yourself. Goodbye." He got behind the wheel and drove off. Within a few seconds, the noise of the engine died down and an eerie silence reigned. Jessica walked slowly into the house. Here, where voices had been heard just recently, now there were half-empty cabinets. Only an old sofa and a few unsorted boxes remained, in which there was nothing valuable. She sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. I wanted to scream, but my tears dried up. She suddenly remembered how a few days ago she was still texting with one of her other acquaintances, feeling the adrenaline. And today it all seems like a disgusting mistake that took her husband and daughter away from her. The phone vibrated in the bag. She took it out and saw that her mother was calling. My heart sank into a tiny lump. "Mom," she whispered, accepting the challenge. "Daughter," said an alarmed voice. "I don't know if I should say it, but your father doesn't want to communicate with you. He repeats, 'Let her be ashamed.' Haley called us, crying. He says he can't bear to meet you." "I know," Jessica managed. "I'm already sick of it. Do you understand how painful it is for everyone? Dad is furious. I don't know how to look people in the eyes either. We thought you had the perfect family, and suddenly this. Believe me, I'm not proud of myself," she answered in a broken voice. "But what should I do?" "I don't know," the mother said sadly. "The father said, 'We didn't raise her for this. Since she did this, let her sort it out herself.' I can't help it. Sorry, but it's better for you not to come here." The connection has been lost. Jessica smiled bitterly, realizing that she was left without parental support. It seemed as if all the doors were locked in front of her. Even Emily's sister, who was usually ready to come to the rescue, said on the phone the day before that her father was categorically against any contact with her traitor daughter. Several hours passed in agonizing silence. Jessica wandered through the rooms where she had once laughed out loud while watching Haley rehearse a dance or cook dinners for the family. Now every corner is reminded of past happiness. Soon the door opened quietly and Mrs. Roberts, a neighbor, timidly entered. "Sorry, honey. I saw Josh leave. Are you still getting divorced?" she asked, lowering her eyes. "Yes," Jessica confirmed briefly, feeling that this conversation would give her another injection. "I'm sorry," the neighbor answered, crumpling at the threshold. "But people around are whispering that you cheated on your husband." "I don't know what to say." "There's no need to say anything," Jessica retorted wearily. "It's too late to change everything." The neighbor muttered something as a sign of sympathy and left. Her face clearly showed her embarrassment and desire not to get involved further. So are the rest of our acquaintances. Just yesterday they admired the ideal family. Today they whisper to each other, looking at Jessica from under their brows. By lunchtime, the phone rang again. The name of Pamela, a friend from their previous company, appeared on the screen. My heart skipped a beat. Maybe at least someone will decide to support me. "Hello," she muttered. "Jessica, I'm sorry, I can't talk for long. Just know that the guys feel for Josh. We don't want to get involved and pick sides, but it's hard to protect you either. Everyone is offended for Haley. She is a child after all. I hope you understand." There was a short, all-clear signal. Jessica put down the phone, feeling another door slam shut. No one wanted to spoil the relationship with her husband and daughter, who now looked like the injured party. But she remained a traitor from whom everyone turned away. At one point, she lay down on the living room floor, looking at the ceiling. Tears flowed down her cheeks, but it seemed to her that she no longer had the strength to even cry. The image of Haley screaming in front of my eyes, "I will never forgive you." The memory of these words made my heart clench. When it got dark, the house was plunged into darkness. No lamps and no desire to turn on the lights. Jessica sat in silence, remembering how they once watched movies with the whole family in the evenings, covered with a blanket. Today, no one will turn on the TV, bring hot tea, or laugh at a funny scene. It was as if it happened in another life. The next day, she woke up to a knock on the door. It turned out that the courier brought some papers. "From Josh's lawyer," he said, looking away. Jessica signed and, slamming the door, slowly walked towards the sofa. Yes, everything is heading towards divorce, and no one asked her if she wanted to fight for her family. The daughter's position is clear. Mom is to blame. Her husband's parents and her own parents are opposed to her. A little later, a short message came from my sister. "Sorry, but Dad said we can't help you. He's ashamed and angry that we didn't notice your connections in time." Jessica closed her eyes, realizing that she was completely alone. So another day passed, filled with cold and silence. Friends and acquaintances sometimes wrote simply sympathetic phrases, but they all boiled down to the fact that they did not want to conflict with Josh and Haley. No one invited her to a meeting or a cup of coffee. Everyone understood that there were rumors surrounding Jessica. Soon there was a call from the mother, whose voice sounded even more tense. "Daughter, I worry all the time, but your father categorically does not want to talk to you. And Haley, she says that her mom destroyed her faith in her family. Understand that no one will help you out now. You will have to go through this yourself." "Are you really leaving me too?" Jessica asked bitterly. "We can't do otherwise," the mother answered angrily. "The father repeats that he did not raise his daughter for such shame. Sorry, but I can't get into arguments with him. He supports Josh, and I don't want to take away my granddaughter's support." After these words, the connection was broken. Jessica walked into her daughter's empty room. Everything around me reminded me of lost happiness. All that was left were a few boxes and an old drawing on the wall. Haley had once depicted a joyful family there. Now it seemed that that drawing was a mockery of reality. Another night she tossed and turned, unable to sleep. It seemed that every minute was knocking on the consciousness. You destroyed the marriage, your daughter renounced, your parents kicked you out. Hearing Haley's voice in her ears, I hate it, she shuddered and opened her eyes in the darkness. In the morning, I received another message from the lawyer. A date for the divorce hearing had been set. No surprises. Jessica herself understood that the trial would go quickly because she would not challenge custody of the child. Haley clearly chose her father. Thus ended her ideal life, once enviable in the eyes of her neighbors. The house, now an empty box, served as silent evidence of her mistakes. The friends pulled away, the relatives closed the doors, the mother repeated about shame, the father did not want to hear her name. The daughter chose to disappear from her mother's life. The next morning came, just as cold and joyless. Jessica wandered around the rooms, sometimes looking at her phone. There was no good news. Only in my head did it sound. I didn't raise you for this. The mother's reproach, which was echoed by her father, sister, and everyone who considered her an exemplary wife. Now there is not a trace left of that exemplary character. She sank to the floor in the corridor, clasped her head in her hands, and began to cry. Nobody came to help. She herself didn't know what else could be done. Her daughter closed herself off, her friends kept her away, her parents didn't let her in, and her husband left, leaving her to deal with the leftovers. That's the whole result. In the silence of the room, she heard an echo. Nobody needs you. And indeed, everyone left. She bitterly recalled how a few months ago, she suddenly decided that the family routine was too boring. I was looking for passion. I thought it was just a game, and now the game has turned into a disaster. The day had passed midday, but the house remained gloomy. She automatically took a few sips of water, not even thinking about lunch. Empty shelves, bare walls, and traces of previous lives everywhere. She went into the bedroom where she had recently been lying with her husband, and now only faded spots remained from the comfort of the bed, and even those were almost taken away. In the evening, she had no more strength left, and she sat down by the window, watching the sun go down. It seems that life itself is coming to a dead end. Megan did not write. Pamela was silent. The parents did not want to call because it would anger the father. Josh and his daughter were probably already settling into their new place. What's next? Jessica asked herself, but did not know the answer. When darkness fell, she finally accepted that it was impossible to return to the past. Haley went to her father, her friends pulled away, her mother repeated, I didn't raise you for this, and her father completely cut her out of the family. Neighbors chatter, acquaintances are silent. There was no warmth or sympathy left for her in the city. Jessica woke up early in the morning, barely catching the faint rays of the sun breaking through the curtains of her rented apartment. 6 months have passed since she left her own home in haste and tears, which turned into a cemetery of her former life. 6 months filled with attempts to survive alone, come to terms with a new reality, and come to terms with the fact that her husband and daughter rejected her. 6 months filled with the thought that everything was already over, that things couldn't get worse. She had long ago given up hope for reconciliation. Her daughter refused to answer calls, and her parents, at best, limited themselves to short, polite phrases. Her father still did not want to see her. The mother got in touch a couple of times, but only to briefly check if Jessica was alive and if she had done something. Megan's best friend once sheltered her, and then she moved away, saying that, we need to move on. As a result, Jessica somehow settled into a small apartment on the edge of town, found a job in the service sector far removed from her previous activities, and spent her days trying not to go crazy with sadness and guilt. All these 6 months, she remembered Haley. What was it like for her to live with her father? Does she still cry at night? Or, on the contrary, did you feel relieved to erase your mother from your life? Nobody reported any news. Everything that Jessica knew came either from the gossip of acquaintances or from the meager echoes of social networks, where she sometimes dared to look. But there she saw almost no mention of herself. Josh, as she heard, remained in the new housing, and her daughter was actively involved in her studies and went to all kinds of clubs. She didn't ask Jessica's father and mother anything unnecessary. Conversations always ended mid-sentence as soon as she mentioned Haley's name. And so life went on evenly in melancholy and loneliness until one weekday in a small store where Jessica now worked part-time, a girl she knew suddenly approached her named Angela. The girl worked in a beauty salon nearby. Once upon a time, they crossed paths in the area, and now Angela stopped by to buy something and at the same time exchange a few words. "Hi, I haven't seen you for a long time," Angela said, a little embarrassed, throwing lotion and a comb into the basket. "How are you?" "Yes, more or less," Jessica answered evasively. I live slowly. I work here now. She has already learned to automatically answer such phrases without going into details. But Angela suddenly tensed up and leaned towards the cash register. "Listen, my tongue itches, but I don't know if I should talk. Rumor has it that Josh—" Jessica pursed her lips. Any phrase that started with rumor is that Josh was always painful for her. "What's wrong with him?" She squeezed out, expecting to hear anything. Maybe he found a new job, or he and Haley had some kind of family history. But Angela made a guilty face. "Sorry, I don't want to mind my own business. There's just rumors that he's dating your sister." "With Emily Wright, is it your youngest?" Jessica looked up sharply, feeling how everything inside her was breaking. "What? Can't be." "I was surprised too," Angela muttered, rummaging through her bag for her wallet. "But I saw them together a couple of times, and others saw them. They don't seem to be hiding much. They look pretty close, if you know what I mean. True, I didn't want to hurt you, but I decided that it would be better for you to find out from a friend than directly from someone. They say Emily almost moved in with him." Jessica's heart was pounding in her temples. A scene from 6 months ago surfaced in my memory. She herself betrayed Josh, destroying the marriage. And now he's dating her little sister, which she once looked after and loved. It seems like a bad joke. "This can't be true," she whispered, feeling the blood pounding in her ears. "My sister? Why? How?" "Don't know. I definitely don't know. I saw them myself only briefly." Angela spread her hands. "Sorry. If anything, I didn't say anything. I'll go. I have a client signed up." She hurriedly left, leaving Jessica in a daze. The next 2 hours of work passed in a fog. She hardly knew what she was selling, confused the price tags, and forgot to give out change 3 times. There was a pounding in my head. Impossible. These are rumors. Emily won't do that. Yes, she understood that relations in the family were shaken, that her sister actually sided with Josh and Haley, but to date her ex-husband. This is a blatant betrayal. However, the more she tried to reject this thought, the more fear flared inside her. What if the truth? Having closed the store in the evening, she went to her lonely apartment. All the way, conscience and pride argued in my head. Should I call Emily? Versus, she turned away herself, and she's unlikely to tell you the truth to your face. Jessica knew she couldn't just live quietly knowing about such rumors and not trying to find out what was going on. But it's scary to go straight to your sister. "This is some kind of wildness," Jessica repeated to herself as she went to bed. "Emily can't have an affair with a man who was her sister's husband, with whom she gave birth to Haley. Or maybe—" The night passed without sleep. She imagined scenes of Josh hugging Emily and Haley smiling, accepting a new mother into the family. The very thought of it drove me crazy. In the morning, as soon as she arrived at work, she tried to find traces on social networks. But neither Emily nor Josh advertised anything. A couple of mutual friends posted photos, but there was no evidence anywhere. Just rumors, a couple of hints, phrases like, "We saw someone, it seems life is in full swing." Nothing specific. Another week passed like this. The rumors kept growing. Jessica heard from different people that Emily and Josh appeared in public together, sometimes in the company of Haley. Some claimed that the girl is often seen joyful, along with her aunt and dad. It was as if they had a new family. Every day, Jessica felt more and more like an internal knot of anger. Pain and humiliation was tightening, preventing her from breathing. After all, everyone turned away from her 6 months ago because of her mistake. And now, when time has passed, it suddenly turns out that her younger sister has taken her place, approaching her husband and daughter. One evening, when the gossip became too much, Jessica firmly decided that she could not stand it any longer. I have to see this with my own eyes. They can't all be lying, can they? She left work an hour early, lied that she wasn't feeling well, and headed to the area where she knew Josh's apartment. 6 months ago, she herself did not dare to appear there, so as not to anger Haley and not run into a scandal, but now anger and despair took over. Having reached the desired address, she noticed her sister's car at the entrance. Dark gray, with a noticeable sticker on the rear window. It was impossible to make a mistake. So she's really here, flashed through my head. My heart was pounding, my palms were sweating. She stopped opposite, not knowing what to do. Break into the entrance, ring the doorbell and make a scene, or wait and see if they come out together. A troubled inner voice said, "What will this give you? Did you want to be forgiven?" She herself was the first to betray them. But suddenly resentment flared up in my chest. This was my husband for many years, and my sister had no right to do this. She stood in ambush for about 20 minutes, and then the entrance door opened. 3 people came out into the street. Daughter, Haley, already stretched out over these 6 months, in a jacket and jeans. Emily walked next to her, holding the girl by the shoulder with a smile, and next Josh, looking calm, some kind of folder in one hand, keys in the other, like an ordinary family going on business. Jessica felt a sharp blow to her heart. Here it is, direct confirmation. They are together. And Haley, whom she hasn't seen for 6 months, even looks happy in the company of Aunt Emily and her father. Maybe the girl already perceives her aunt as a second mother. Tears welled up in my eyes. She took a couple of steps forward, unable to suppress the urge to say something. "Haley," she called, as if forgetting that she refused to talk to her. The daughter shuddered, turned around, saw her mother, and immediately became gloomy. Her face became cold. "Mother," she said briefly, without approaching. Emily, noticing Jessica, let go of her niece's hand in confusion. Josh also froze, narrowing his eyes. The silence was broken only by the distant hum of cars. No one spoke for a few seconds, then Josh took a step forward. "What are you doing here?" Jessica whispered chokedly, trying to stay upright. "You know, I heard strange rumors. I wanted to make sure it wasn't true. But apparently it's all true, right?" She looked desperately at her sister, who looked away to the side. This gesture already contained confirmation. "Emily, are you really with him?" Jessica asked in a trembling voice. "With my ex-husband." The sister bit her lip, then answered quietly. "You yourself destroyed everything. Yes, we are together." Something snapped inside Jessica, and her head started spinning. She knew that her sister had been cold to her for a long time, supporting Haley and Josh, but she thought that this was just family solidarity, not romance. Hearing confirmation in person was too hard. "How? How could you?" She exhaled, clenching her fists. Haley shifted nervously from foot to foot, looking first at her father and then at her aunt. It was clear that the girl did not want to interfere, but she was clearly unpleasant to see her mother. "Let's go to the car," Josh said to his daughter and Emily. "I'll talk to her myself." Haley obeyed, only giving Jessica a cold look. Emily, without saying anything, also stepped towards the car, but on the way she tried to glance at her sister, as if wanting to say something exculpatory. But such a fiery reproach could be read from Jessica's eyes that she immediately hurried to look away. When they were alone, Josh calmly asked, "And what do you want to hear? Did you think that I would sit alone forever? Or that life is frozen after your forbidden hobbies? Yes, I betrayed you, but that doesn't mean you can." Jessica was out of breath, at a loss for words. "This is my sister. This is disgusting. You can't do that," he shrugged. "It's funny to hear moral teachings from a woman who herself deceived her husband. Yes, your betrayal destroyed the family, and then Emily helped me and Haley. She became close to both of us. The novel did not arise in one day, but gradually. And by the way, Haley doesn't mind. She feels good when her aunt, whom she has known and trusts for a long time, is nearby." Jessica almost screamed at these words. So, her own daughter thinks it's normal for her father to date her aunt. It seemed like a farce, but apparently reality is even harsher. "You're crazy," she said in a trembling voice. "Once upon a time, we had a real family, but now, all this, all of these are the consequences of your choice." Josh pricked her. "You yourself destroyed everything, and it's not for you to judge with whom I'm building my new life. As for Emily, she doesn't owe you anything, especially after you deceived us all. Why on earth are you indignant?" Jessica's heart was beating wildly, and it seemed as if she would faint from a mixture of anger and pain. She wanted to scream, throw insults, but there were people nearby. Haley could have come out. All that was missing was for the girl to see her mother in hysterics. "You mean you're not going to stop this?" she squeezed out, clenching her fists. "Are you really dating my little sister without any shame?" "Yes, and I don't see any reason why I should be ashamed," Josh answered in an icy tone. "We were officially divorced. You had nothing to do with it. Your sister is a grown woman and wants nothing to do with you. Dot. Haley thinks so too." "Haley," Jessica shuddered, remembering her daughter's face. "She, how can she support this? This is. It's more important to her that I be happy and that she has reliable support," Josh interrupted. "She's comfortable. Emily is good and takes care of her. What do you want? For me to suffer alone again, or abandon Haley for your experiments? No, really." From these words, Jessica seemed to have been dealt a new blow. Experiments, that's what he calls her past mistakes. She understood that it was her own fault, but she still felt like she had no strength to accept this state of affairs. Her sister betrayed her, her daughter decided to renounce, and Josh calmly insists that all this is normal. "This is low," she said, feeling that her eyes were burning from tears. "Do you feel sorry for me at least a little? After all, you know what it looks like from the outside." "It's a pity," he asked again with sarcasm. "I think you felt sorry for yourself enough in recent months. I see no point in entering into controversy. Go live your life." He walked away, making it clear that the conversation was over. She grabbed his sleeve. "Wait, and Haley, can I even talk to her? She's my daughter. I doubt she wants to. She is glad that she no longer depends on your correspondence or your excuses. But if suddenly Haley herself expresses a desire, I won't interfere. Although, apparently, she is doing well anyway." Jessica unclenched her hand, realizing that it was useless to struggle. She saw Haley sitting in the car, looking away sadly. Or maybe it's not sadness, but irritation. It's hard to say. Probably, the daughter would not tolerate it if her mother tried to come over now. "Scum," she whispered quietly in her heart, looking at Josh. "And my sister, too." "Okay," he interrupted. "Enough. We're leaving. Try not to follow us. And so everything is clear." With these words, he took the keys out of his pocket and got into the car, without even giving Jessica a farewell glance. He started the engine, and Emily glanced out from there, as if checking to see if her sister was running with her fists. But Jessica froze, not knowing whether to cry or scream. The car drove off and disappeared around the bend. She felt that her legs could not hold up. She leaned on the wall of the entrance and sat down, trying to calm down the frantic beating of her heart. The most bitter thought was not that Josh had betrayed her, she had been a traitor herself before, but that her sister Emily had taken her place next to her daughter. Haley, her own girl, now accepts her aunt as a new figure in her life, and her mother is left with nothing to do with it. It seemed humiliating, unfair, and inhumane, although from their perspective, perhaps they simply decided to write out Jessica, who cheated on her husband and hurt her family. She wandered home like a drunk, not noticing passers-by. Various people looked sideways at her, suspecting that she was somehow unwell. But Jessica didn't care. Tears flowed, she did not wipe them away. It seemed to her that 6 months of struggle for survival turned into dust in one day, when she found out that her place had actually been taken by her younger sister. Having reached the apartment, she sat for a long time in the dark corridor without undressing, through tears clouding her eyes, looking at the furniture that she had somehow acquired over these months. It suddenly seemed to her that all this was meaningless, that she would never see Joy again. Her parents crossed her out, her daughter too, and her sister took her place next to Josh. Deep down, she understood that she herself had caused the destruction of the family, but she did not expect that she would be replaced by the person closest to her. Several days passed in complete despair. She stopped eating and skipped work. The store owner called and demanded an explanation, but Jessica could not find the strength to get up. At night, she was tormented by nightmares where Emily laughed at her along with Haley. In the morning, she sat in silence, staring at the phone. What if her daughter texted? But there were no messages. One day, she finally pulled herself together, went out into the street, and went to her mother, hoping at least for her participation. But when she arrived at her parents' house, she found the door locked there. Neighbors said that the parents had gone out of town to visit distant relatives, so there was no way to talk, and her father still didn't want to see her. At least call Emily, she thought, dialing her sister's number, but before each call her heart sank. For what? She still won't make excuses. He thinks he has the right. A photo of my sister was displayed on the screen, smiling even before all these troubles. In the end, Jessica never pressed the call button. Nothing changed. The work was not enjoyable. The people around seemed strangers. The rumors that Josh and Emily were doing great as a couple only intensified. Someone said in a whisper, "Did you hear that he goes to the cinema with her? Did they go to the park? The daughter is with them." At these words, Jessica trembled all over with anger and powerlessness. It seemed to her that it was a direct mockery to see how the new couple was enjoying time with her child. Finally, one day, when despair reached its limit, she decided to call Emily herself for a frank conversation. Send a message. "Please meet me. We need to talk. I won't make a scandal. I just want to understand how you could do this." The sister did not answer for several hours. Then she dryly wrote, "Tomorrow at 8 in the evening, Victoria Cafe. Come if you want." The next evening, Jessica sat in the corner of the cafe, looking at her watch. With difficulty, I forced myself to come, although I was afraid that the conversation would turn into a scream. When the door opened, she saw her sister. She walked in confidently, wearing a coat, her hair in curls, looking better than ever. This means how beneficial my ex-family influences her, Jessica thought with bitter irony. Emily came over, sat down opposite, ordered tea, without trying to smile. There was silence for several seconds. Finally, Jessica couldn't stand it anymore. "Tell me, how did this happen? You knew that I was suffering without Haley, that Josh hated me for cheating. And still, did you get along with him? How long have you been together?" The sister looked away. "At first, I just wanted to help Haley. She was very worried about you. She was in pain. I started spending time with her, and then I started talking to Josh. Over time, feelings flared up between us, if you want to know, and I decided that this was not bad." "Not bad," Jessica almost shouted, clenching her hand into a fist. "Take your sister's place? Steal my husband? Kidnap my daughter?" "Stop it," Emily interrupted, slamming the table. "Didn't you yourself become the first to destroy the marriage? When you cheated on Josh, did you think about what it was like for your family? Do you have the nerve to reproach us now? This is completely different." Jessica objected with tears. "Yes, I made a mistake, but you are my sister. Is it possible to build your happiness on the ashes of my marriage?" Emily looked firmly. "I didn't set out to betray you. You yourself betrayed everyone, and I just happened to be there when they needed support. At first, Haley hated me too, but then, over time, we found a common language. She doesn't think I'm taking your place. For her, you did not fulfill your responsibilities. You abandoned your family for the sake of affairs, and I am the person who supported them during a difficult period." Jessica gasped with indignation. "So it's so easy to justify your action. She cheated, so we can do whatever we want. What about morality and family ties?" The sister pursed her lips. "I didn't want to say, but we don't think that we are acting immorally. You and Josh are divorced. You have disgraced your family and lost the rights that come with marriage. and Haley was looking for at least some kind of stability. I became not only her aunt, but also a person who would not betray her. And yes, Josh and I are together. I'm not ashamed. Emily's eyes sparkled with stubbornness. She seemed to have crossed the line where she could be persuaded to retreat. Jessica exhaled shakily. Do your father and mother know? Are they supporting? They support me, Emily answered briefly. Do you think Dad is judgmental? No, he said. Since Jessica flew out of the family anyway, we won't interfere. Mom also agreed. They believe that now Haley has someone to look after, and Josh will have a normal couple. From these words, everything inside sank even more. This means that the parents did not just turn away, but blessed the new family of Josh, Haley, and Emily, as if Jessica had never existed. How can you? She whispered, feeling like she was about to burst into tears. Emily sighed, looking at her face. Maybe this will seem cruel to you, but look at the situation from the outside. Everyone thinks that you yourself destroyed your family. For 6 months, no one wanted to hear from you. Josh gradually recovered, Haley came to her senses, and found in me a person who would not leave. We started to get closer, and we see that together we can become a good couple and give the child support. Is this worse than Haley living in chaos? I created chaos, Jessica said sadly. But you could. I could have looked for someone else than my sister. You can't order your heart, Emily shrugged, clearly copying her confident intonation. It happened, and there is no point in going back. In the silence of the cafe, the muffled voices of other visitors could be heard. Jessica felt that her tears were bursting out, but she tried to control herself. The sister was also clearly nervous, but continued to defend herself and Josh. I hate what you do, Jessica finally said, swallowing the lump in her throat. But it seems that you all have decided that I have no right to vote. You're right, Emily said coldly. Sorry if it hurts to hear, but it's time for you to come to terms with it. After that, both fell silent for a long time. Finally, Emily pushed away the cup of tea, which she never touched. I think this is the end of the conversation. I wanted to tell you everything to your face. Don't think that we were waiting on purpose to finish you off. This is life. You need to build your own. She stood up. Jessica wanted to call out to her, but she couldn't find the words. Soon the sister left, leaving money for tea on the table. Jessica sat for another 15 minutes, not taking her eyes off the cup, which also contained an untouched drink. There was a pounding in my head. This is the end. My sister, my parents, and my daughter all think that I have lost my rights to a family. Returning to her place, she cried for several days, considering herself the most unfortunate person. Yes, she is to blame for her husband's betrayal, but still it was his and her marriage. And now Emily has taken her place, and everyone considers this the norm. There seemed to be no way out of this impasse. Mutual acquaintances, having learned about the latest news, began to gossip even louder behind their backs. You see what it has come to. Even my sister is now with her husband. Nobody expressed sympathy. Everything boiled down to the fact that she was the first to cheat, so you shouldn't be sorry. After some time, Jessica realized that life continued to beat her on all fronts. At work, she was pulled from several shifts because she, according to her boss, appeared depressed and customers were complaining. She had little money, renting an apartment was straining her wallet, and there was no help in sight. Her parents were not going to change their attitude towards her. Her father generally forbade her mother to help her. Her sister found happiness in the family that Jessica herself had lost. The daughter did not contact me. Only one thought remained inside. What if we tried to win back Haley's affection? But every attempt to contact her daughter by phone ended with the girl dropping the call or writing, "Don't call." Jessica understood that her daughter felt betrayed by her, and now her aunt is taking up her space. It hurts to admit, but Haley seems to be okay with this since she doesn't try to change anything. One evening, returning from a hard shift, she found a letter on the threshold of her apartment without a return address in a simple envelope. Having opened it, I saw a short note. Stop meddling in their lives. You ruined everything. Leave Josh, Haley and Emily alone. Don't you dare try to create scandals. No signature. Perhaps it was someone from the family's acquaintances, or maybe the sister herself decided to scare. Clutching the paper in her hands, Jessica thought that she had reached the last line. Everyone thinks that I don't even have the right to have feelings, let alone try to get my daughter back, she stated. But she couldn't come to terms with it completely. Sometimes she imagined herself throwing herself at Haley's feet and shouting, "I'm sorry." But alas, she understood that the girl, having become ill, chose life without her mother. Every time she saw happy families near her work, in which mother, father, and children were holding hands, her heart ached. And my sister took over my family, I repeated endlessly in my head. But what if the world turns against her? Friends, relatives, ex-husband, own daughter, no one wanted to let her in. Since then, she stopped looking for meetings. And yet the anger and pain did not subside. Her mind reminded that she had no right to judge her sister because she herself had once destroyed a marriage, and her heart screamed that this was betrayal squared, since the closest blood turned out to be the new wife in her house. So the days passed in grave apathy. Jessica saw how people around them lived their lives, and she remained in the shadows, without family, without friends, without support. She wanted to take revenge, but did not know how. Sometimes she wrote harsh messages to Emily, but immediately deleted them, fearing that this would turn her daughter against her even more. One day, at a supermarket on the other side of town, where she went to buy groceries, she accidentally ran into Emily and Haley, who were choosing fruit. Seeing Jessica, the daughter quickly hid behind her aunt, and Emily looked expectantly at her sister. Jessica, afraid of running into a public scandal, hurried to turn around and leave. And behind me, I heard Haley calling Emily Mama M in a joking manner. This made everything shake inside. I wanted to run and scream. But she understood that in the girl's eyes she no longer had weight. Returning home, she buried her face in the pillow, squeezing out quiet sobs. "Mom," she replayed in her mind. "My sister is now a mother to my Haley. Lord, how can I live with this?" But the answer did not come, and a painful question pounded in my chest. Did I really deserve such a punishment? As the weeks passed, news of Josh and Emily's couple continued to reach her. According to rumors, the two of them were setting up a new apartment, where Emily was moving from her parents' house. Mother and father approved of this decision, helped them with furniture, and sometimes visited them there. Haley was glad that her grandparents were nearby, that Aunt Emily was with her, and no one was talking about her mother. No one mentioned that Jessica was part of this family too. The pain seemed endless. The anger almost did not recede because she could not regain the respect of her relatives. Sometimes she fell to her knees in her lonely apartment, clenched her fists, and whispered, "Sorry, sorry," as if she hoped that at least God would hear. But the answer was only emptiness. One evening she received a call from Megan, the same friend with whom she had long been estranged. She asked how things were going and if they needed help. Jessica, breaking into tears, told her everything about Emily and Josh's affair. Megan gasped, "Yes, I heard the rumors, but I didn't think it was true." How cruel. But alas, she could not help in any way. She only sympathized. "Terrible," Megan said. "But apparently they feel they have every right. After all, you are no longer husband and wife, but your daughter has unconditionally accepted a new life." "It's like I'm not there," Jessica summed up sadly. "You know, I'm afraid that Haley will completely forget me, and my sister will become a mother, as if I had never given birth to a child." Megan tried to calm her down, but it didn't help much. After the conversation, Jessica sat in the dark, remembering how it all began. Once she herself, in search of passion, decided to cheat, hoping that it's nothing. She didn't think that she would bring down the whole world and that her sister would take her place in the family. Now all that remained was to exist day after day, watching as all the doors slammed shut and the younger sister and ex-husband were building their idol. Perhaps in some other reality Jessica would have had a chance to fix everything, but in this reality no one wanted to forgive her. From now on she was alone, and the worst betrayal imaginable has come true. when your own sister and your husband are together and your daughter stands by their side. Jessica sat in her small, almost empty apartment, feeling that any further movement required enormous effort. Her life has long turned into an endless spiral of pain. She lost her husband, lost her home, her mother and father turned away from her, and even her sister took her place in the family. But the worst thing for Jessica is to realize that her daughter Haley, the only treasure for which she would be willing to sacrifice everything, now does not want to look her in the eye. In the end, Jessica herself brought the situation to the point of no return, where no one needs or is interested, where everyone she knows says, "It's your own fault." She did not know where to go from humiliation and melancholy. It had been many months since she discovered Josh and Emily were together. All subsequent life was a blooming reminder of her defeat. The sister she once protected and loved took her place next to her ex-husband. The daughter spent these months without her mother, increasingly moving away from thoughts about her. The parents supported the new couple, deciding that since Jessica had disgraced everyone with her unreasonable behavior, it was worth moving on. What's most painful? Without her participation, everyone else moved, as if they had written Jessica off. But there was still a barely glimmering spark of hope in Jessica's soul. What if she showed sincere repentance, everything could be fixed at least a little? One day, sitting in a dimly lit room, she peered at a photograph where Haley was still little, about 7 years old, no more. In the photo, they stood as a family. Josh was holding his daughter in his arms, and Sister Emily was laughing somewhere on the side, because she was always nearby. Then everyone was happy. Now everything is different, and her own mistakes are to blame. But who would have guessed that it would be her sister who would oust her from her daughter's life? Tears flowed down Jessica's cheeks, leaving salty trails, and her hands trembled. A couple of weeks ago, she already made an attempt to publicly talk about her guilt. She wrote a post on one of the social networks into which she poured her whole soul. She described in detail how she regrets, begs for forgiveness, and admits her own sins to her husband, parents, and daughter. She posted it without having any special subscribers and doubting that anyone would want to sympathize. But the post shook up her acquaintances. Some responded negatively, saying that she should have thought earlier, some ignored her altogether, and there were those who carefully wrote, "We're sorry, but we can't help." Deep down, she hoped that Josh or Haley would see her remorse. Perhaps your sister, parents, someone would like to meet. But days passed, and she did not receive a single warm response from the family. This finished her off morally, but, paradoxically, strengthened her determination to make direct contact. If you can't reach people with posts, then you need to act differently. Why not try to talk to Josh in person? Let him throw out anger and resentment on her. Let him insult her if only fate gives her a chance to tell her daughter that her mother still loves her. In the depths of her heart, she understood that this path would not be easy, and I myself was not sure that all this was correct. She was scared to see the coldness in Haley's eyes again, but inaction seemed even more painful. In the end, there is no other way to get out of the loneliness trap. Last night, she wrote a short letter to Josh. "Please let me talk to you, for the sake of my daughter." And oddly enough, he replied, "Okay, come on Saturday when Haley won't be home, but I can't promise that the conversation will be pleasant." Saturday has arrived. Jessica barely slept all night, thinking about what she would say, how she would beg him to forgive at least for the sake of a normal relationship. In the morning, she quickly got ready, put on the most decent dress she had left, trying to look at least a little presentable. Having reached the desired address, I almost changed my mind at the door, but still she decided to knock. Josh himself opened the door, looked briefly into his eyes, and stepped aside to let him pass. The house was cozy and quiet. Once she herself helped arrange this life, but now everything looked alien. New interior details, different photographs. Jessica spotted a photo of Haley posing with Emily and Josh. My heart sank. The thought came, even the memory of me is being erased. But she chose to remain silent and only stepped into the living room. "Okay," Josh said, crossing his arms over his chest. "You wanted to talk. Speak. Haley's at Emily's, so you only have about 10 minutes. His voice sounded cold. It was as if he had prepared in advance for an unpleasant scene. Jessica clenched her hands, trying to breathe more evenly. Josh, I know it's my fault. All these months I tried. Yes, I understand, it all sounds pathetic, but I cannot find words to express my repentance. And yet I ask you, for Haley's sake, not to hold such a mortal grudge against me. Let us communicate, somehow. He shook his head. I'm not holding you by force. You can communicate if your daughter wants. The problem is, Haley doesn't believe you. She refused to read your posts. He thinks these are just words. She has no desire to listen to pleas. She still remembers how you lied. But I've changed, Jessica said, burning tears coming to her eyes. I don't know how to prove it. I can only beg you all to give me a chance. Josh peered into her face, where almost nothing remained of her former pride and beauty, only a shadow of the feelings that once united them. He chuckled bitterly. You seem to repent. But what's the point? You destroyed yourself. I had just left when I realized that you had been wandering around the other bunks for a long time and calling it fun. What now? You can't turn back time. Jessica wanted to object, to explain that not everything was so cynical, that once she simply lost her head. But I understood. No matter what I said, he wouldn't believe it. Too much water has flown under the bridge. In addition, the fact of the affair between him and her sister has not gone away. The very thought of it made her shudder. I'm not trying to win you back, she whispered, having difficulty pronouncing the words. I just want us to be able to communicate for the sake of our daughter. You see, so much time has passed, but it's important for me that Haley at least knows that I'm there, that I don't want to disappear from her life. Words. Josh shrugged. What are they for if Haley doesn't want to listen? As I said, she now considers her family to be different. With me and Emily, yes, I understand, it hurts to hear. But you have to accept, she is not attracted to you. Perhaps something will change over time, but for now. He fell silent, as if not knowing what else to add. Jessica looked down at the floor, feeling her lips tremble. She struggled to control her emotions for a few moments, then said quietly, Fine. Then give me at least the opportunity to write to her, or call. And you, don't push her away if she suddenly thinks about me. I won't turn her against her, Josh answered dryly, but I won't help or persuade her to communicate with you either. It's her decision. She nodded, brushing away her tears, trying to thank at least for this indifferent, I won't interfere. The thought was pounding in my head, so all I can count on is Josh's indifference, and that's all. But even that was better than obvious hostility. Soon he looked at his watch. I think it's time for us to finish. I don't want Haley to find you here. This will unsettle her. Jessica realized that the conversation was over. She didn't pester her with reproaches about her sister. It wouldn't change anything anyway. Walking out the door, she felt a suffocating feeling of devastation. I stood at the entrance, trying to come to my senses. It was disgusting in her soul, but there was also a tiny consolation. He did not forbid her to try to contact her daughter, even if there are no guarantees of success. That same evening, choking with tears, she wrote another big post on social networks. But this time she emphasized that she was begging Haley to hear her. She told me how much she loves her daughter, how she misses her, how she wants at least minimal reconciliation, and how she strives to explain everything without concealment. The text was heartbreaking, and before publishing, Jessica erased and added phrases several times, fearing that she would look pathetic. But she no longer cared about her own dignity. For the sake of her daughter, she was ready to publicly admit all her sins. So she did. 2 days passed, and suddenly, to her surprise, a meager reaction from several acquaintances appeared under the post. Someone sympathized, someone scolded her again, but most importantly, she noticed in the list of views an account that Haley sometimes used. This means that my daughter at least opened this post and possibly read it. Jessica's heart sank with hope. If she saw my words, maybe she would think at least a little, she prayed in a quiet whisper. Another week later, the phone call that Jessica had been waiting for so long rang. It was Haley. The girl was silent on the phone for several seconds, then asked, "That post, did you really realize everything?" Jessica almost crumbled with relief, but pulled herself together, trying to speak evenly. "Yes, daughter. I thought about my actions many times. I'm sorry I hurt you, Dad, everyone. I would give anything to bring back the past." There was a pause on the other end. Then Haley said quietly, "I hate that you destroyed our family. But, I don't know, after your post, I wanted to at least talk." Tears welled up in Jessica's eyes. She forced herself to breathe deeply so as not to cry into the phone and push her daughter away. "I understand. I just ask, give me a chance. I'm not forcing you to pretend that nothing happened, but can. Can I see you sometime? Should I go for coffee? Or just talk?" The girl exhaled. "I will think. Maybe we'll meet in the park. But I don't want Aunt Emily and Dad to know. Bye." Jessica felt a pang of pain that her daughter was hiding the meeting, but agreed because this was already a step. Haley called herself. A couple of days later, they met in a small park on the outskirts. As soon as Jessica approached, she noticed how much her daughter had grown. In 6 months, the girl had matured, become even taller, looked confident, and even though. They sat down on the bench. It immediately became clear that Haley was wary, as if afraid of giving in to emotions. Jessica tried not to press, realizing that now every word could decide the future fate of their communication. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "I really want to make contact. I understand that you are angry, and you have the right to be." Haley pursed her lips. "I'm not only angry, I don't trust you. When I was hurting the most, you were distracted by something else. It seemed to me that Mom is the one who is always there, but it turned out that Mom can deceive." These words took Jessica's breath away. She wanted to hug her daughter and ask for forgiveness, but she was afraid to push too hard. "I'm ashamed of what I did," she admitted. "I can repeat this endlessly, but I just want you to know I always loved you, even though I did something so terrible." The daughter nodded, but her eyes remained cold. "Perhaps someday I will believe you. But for now, it's hard for me. I'm used to living with Dad and Aunt Emily. They didn't betray me. Although Dad is angry with you, he doesn't stop me from communicating if I want. But I'm not sure what I want." "I understand," Jessica repeated, feeling her hands shaking. "Maybe you can at least see me sometimes, even if not often. I'd like to keep in touch. I adore you, even if you don't believe me." Haley paused, looking into the distance. "Okay, let's try it. But I hope you won't say bad things about your dad and aunt. For me, they are family. If you say Emily is bad, I'll leave." At these words, Jessica's heart sank because she could not stand the thought of a relationship between her sister and her husband. "But I realized, if you want to maintain communication with your daughter, you need to resign yourself and remain silent." "Okay," she said through force, "I won't. If only we could talk sometimes." Haley nodded and stood up, lifting her backpack slightly. She looked at Jessica with an expression that still showed resentment, but also a timid glimmer of hope. "Okay, I'll go. I'll write to you when we meet again." She turned around and walked down the path. Jessica sat until she was out of sight, then gave vent to tears, relieved and bitter. This was the first contact where the daughter agreed to continue communication. Of course, there was zero trust, but at least she allowed her mother to get half a step closer. From that moment on, a timid warming really began. Haley sometimes wrote short messages without heartfelt revelations, rather stating facts. But Jessica was jubilant inside, at least something. She understood that her daughter was still close to her father and Emily, but she tried not to dwell on this topic, only cautiously asking about school, inquiring about her health, and sometimes giving little advice. Sometimes they met in the park or in a cafe. Haley still looked wary and distrustful, but quietly talked about current affairs. Weeks passed like this. Everything changed when Emily's name came up in conversation. One day, her daughter said that her aunt was teaching her to cook, and Jessica involuntarily shuddered. But she remained silent, remembering Haley's request not to criticize the new couple. Contradictions raged inside. It seemed to her that her sister had completely taken her family away from her. But if she begins to express indignation, this will again push her daughter away. At the same time, Jessica felt that she had to tell this same sister everything that was boiling over. And then one day, when she was trying to persuade herself to keep her mouth shut, she suddenly received a message from Emily: "We need to talk, just without a scandal." Apparently, she realized that the relationship between mother and daughter had moved from a dead point, and Emily herself did not want to aggravate the conflict. Secluded again, they met in her sister's car, parked on neutral territory. Emily looked more confident than ever, but she still felt awkward. The first thing Jessica said when she walked in was, "I don't know why you called. If you want to say that you're happy with Josh, I already know." The sister closed the door and turned to her. "I wanted to say that I see how you are trying to communicate with Haley. And to be honest, I think that the girl could use contact with you, albeit limited. Dad also sometimes says that it is better for her to have both parents, but we are afraid that you will turn her against our family." "What?" Jessica almost screamed. "Why would I start tuning? I only dream of somehow improving my relationship with Haley. About your family, I don't accept that you took my place, but if it makes my daughter happy, I won't interfere." Emily breathed a sigh of relief. "Fine. I want you to know that I'm not trying to steal your daughter, although I know it looks that way. But you yourself understand that she was eager to find someone who would not betray her. I found myself in the place of the person who hugged her in a difficult moment. I won't stand in the way if she wants to communicate with you. On the contrary, I think Haley needs to understand that her mother is not a monster." "What generosity!" Jessica smiled bitterly. "Well, at least you don't bother me. Thanks already." There was silence. Then the sister plucked up her courage. "Sorry to bring up a sensitive topic, but I really love Josh. He met me too. We build our lives, but this does not mean that your daughter is no longer yours. I promise I won't interfere as long as you don't. Repeat past mistakes." "I'm not the same as I was," Jessica said, biting her lip. "I've lost too much." Quietly spoken words that contained anger, pain, and fatigue. Emily sighed and put her hand on the steering wheel, avoiding her sister's eyes. "Yes, I understand, and I'm not the same anymore either. We have all changed. We were once close sisters. I'm sorry it turned out this way." Jessica's heart sank. I wanted to give vent to my resentment, but she just said, "Okay, take care, Josh. He never loved me as much as he loved you, although we were once a real family. But since you are together now, give him what I couldn't give." Emily looked at her thoughtfully, then nodded. "I promise that I will do everything to make Haley happy. And as for love, time will sort everything out." Jessica realized that the conversation was over and, in general, was less painful than she expected. It seems that the sisters sincerely wanted peace. Of course, there was no talk of complete forgiveness, but at least they weren't yelling at each other. In the following months, Jessica continued to communicate cautiously with her daughter. Haley would sometimes distance herself, sometimes allowing short meetings, drinking tea together, walking to the nearest store. There was no previous trust, but compared to complete alienation, this was a step forward. Jessica had almost no friends left. She rarely saw her parents, and only in the most extreme cases. The father still believed that his daughter had disgraced the family name. The mother did not dare go against him. But for Haley's sake, everyone was ready to at least turn a blind eye to her attempts to rehabilitate herself. Thus, by the end of the year, the situation had stabilized in a strange equilibrium. Jessica lived alone, worked, and tried not to bother either Josh or Emily. But sometimes I met with Haley, who, albeit without much enthusiasm, came. The girl herself seemed internally torn. On the one hand, she got used to the new family environment, where Aunt Emily became a support for her. On the other hand, she felt pity for her mother, seeing what a deplorable state she was in. Sometimes, already over tea, Haley could discreetly tell how she was doing at school or in a circle, but as soon as Jessica asked a too personal question, the girl immediately closed up. "Mom, we decided not to go deep. I still can't trust you like I used to. And from these words, Jessica's soul sank. She understood that their relationship would never be the same, but it's still better to have at least some kind of connection. There was a dream in my soul that one day Haley would be able to trust her again, but for now these hopes remained illusory. Sometimes, returning home, Jessica remembered everything that had happened over the past year. How she herself destroyed her marriage, how her sister became Josh's wife, how her daughter isolated herself, how she rushed about alone and wrote posts asking for forgiveness. And yet she achieved at least a small reconciliation. Her daughter no longer turned away with contempt, and her sister promised not to interfere with their meeting. At the same time, no one swore complete forgiveness, and there was no longer any talk about Josh ever returning. Yes, she never dreamed of it. The main thing for her is to restore the bridge between herself and Haley. And so came the end of her long journey, filled with despair and repentance. She still had a long time to prove that she was ready to be a reliable mother, at least from a distance. Haley allowed her to be present in her life from time to time, but the openness and intimacy that once was had faded into the past, perhaps forever. However, despite this, Jessica found quiet peace, realizing that her daughter had nevertheless met her halfway. They could slowly learn to talk, albeit without the same warmth. It wasn't a perfect ending to the story, but it was the best she could hope for after all the mistakes. Yes, trust cannot be restored with a click, because it was shattered, once upon a time, at the moment when Jessica stepped over family values. But now at least she has a tiny glimmer of hope that in the future, if she sincerely tries and does not make new mistakes, Haley may one day forgive her more and see her mother as not only a source of pain. In the meantime, they have a long journey of small steps ahead of them. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.